Thank you very much, and thank you for putting on today. It's really awesome. I don't often get to talk in this kind of audience. I generally talk to a very technical audience, and I guess with politics to the broader community. So as I was introduced, I kind of apply in a lot of different fields. I'm a generalist. I think that specialization is for insects, and I love everything probably except for business, which I was dragged kicking and screaming into. Right now, I'm looking at what I'm going to do next, and I'm particularly interested in how do we combat climate change using biotechnologies. Okay, so, good, the animated GIFs work. I never use videos because they never work. Ever since humans have been around, we kind of spent all of our time fighting for survival. So all of our time was dedicated to nothing more than just keeping ourselves alive, particularly from the environment. But humans have one distinct advantage over animals. And that's that we have the ability to create tools that can shape our environment. So we don't have to just be products of our own evolution, but we can actually change the environment to suit our evolution. So this started with things like shelters, and it offered us more and more protection against environmental pressures. And as we grew out of lean-tos through things like condominiums, we've colonized almost every space on Earth and beyond. Right now, there's people living in submarines under the ocean, and there's people living full-time in space on the International Space Station. And as we changed the tools that we've created, our imaginations changed with it. The things that we think are possible grew alongside it. Now, this has led to us having longer and greater qualities of life, and we no longer die from the environment. So even though we have accidents and things like that, overall, we're living longer and healthier lives. But it's not just business as usual. The tools that we're creating now aren't just things like fire or housing, but they're actually biological tools, and that's what I'll be talking to you a lot about today. So these tools have changed the way that we are as people. So technology used to be this kind of extension of ourselves. So we use a scythe like we would use a hand, but do it much more effectively. The tools, though, now are changing the very nature of our beings. As Marshall McLuhan said, we shape the tools, and then the tools shape us. That'll be kind of the central thesis for this talk. Okay, so when we think about technology, we think about things like electronics, we think about things like machines and automation. But my background is in, as was said, is in genetics. So this is a very different type of tool. This is a tool that gives us authorship over life itself. I guess I'm more a biotechnologist now than a geneticist, and there's a subtle difference there. And that's that I see the tools of life as tools to do work or to be changed, rather than just observing the genetics. So one of the most exciting tools that we've had the benefit of finding very, very recently, oh, by the way, if during this conversation anyone has any questions about the science, please put up your hand and I'm happy to go into more detail, is CRISPR. This is a cool little GIF I found. It's like CRISPR is really exciting, but we already kind of had tools like this. They were called zinc fingers and talons, and they were basically tools for modifying the genome, but they were very rough and difficult and expensive to use. CRISPR was a revolution, not for scientists, but for all of us in the audience. So it was cheap, fast, and easy to use. And it gives us the ordinary person the ability to start rewriting the genetic code. The only caveat here is that it only really works well on individual cells. So if you're a multicellular organism like me, which I think we all are, it's kind of not really good for going back through and rewriting it. So if one of us had cystic fibrosis, for example, it'd be very difficult to use CRISPR to go through and fix a fully formed adult. It's great for if you wanted to create a designer baby, though. I actually give another speech, which was recorded last week, on how to make genetically modified cat people. It talks about where you do this, but it's at the embryo stage. So unfortunately, it's not great if you want to, like me, live forever. So I love this quote by Groucho Marx: "I intend to live forever or die trying." I like it because I'm successful no matter what the outcome is. Okay, so how do we achieve immortality as biohackers? So first of all, we had to find the cause of aging. All the things I'm talking about are basically centered around transhuman ideals and how they might affect the world. So Elizabeth Blackburn, who's a researcher from Western Australia, discovered one of the molecular causes of aging, and it was called telomeres. So even though we're getting older and healthier, there seems to be this kind of natural limit. You know, we have people living till 116, but no one's living till 140. And we think that that's because there's actually programmed mechanisms within the body that put this kind of upper ceiling on how old we can live. One of those ceilings was found by Elizabeth Blackburn, who won a Nobel Prize for her discovery, which was telomeres. So put up your hands if you're under 25. You guys are the lucky ones. I am not among you. After 25, a molecular switch gets turned off. And it's basically this little molecular clock that tells your cells how many times they can divide before they have to switch off. Now, this is really good because if a cell divides too many times, it's called cancer generally. So a lot of the anti-aging mechanisms that we have to fight, we also have to say, well, it might give you immortality, but it might also give you cancer. So this is a serious concern. So basically at the end, our genomes are linear. Bacterial genomes are circular. In the linear genomes, when the DNA transcription machinery, replication machinery, latches onto the DNA, there's a little bit at the end. It's kind of like holding a stick. The machinery goes from here upwards, but there's this last little bit at the bottom that it can't quite copy. The telomerase goes and just copies that little bit on. And technically it's called junk DNA because it doesn't really code for anything. It's just there to allow the machinery to latch on. I was lucky enough earlier this year to meet a lady named Liz Parrish, and she runs a company called BioViva. They basically saw a Spanish rat study where they worked out how to switch this back on in adults. And it's not using CRISPR, it's using a technology called adeno-associated viruses. So they're similar to a flu, but scientists defang them. So we remove 2 genes that allow them to copy themselves, but viruses are really good at injecting information in, and it's very topical for the name of today. So I thought I'd stick that one in there, yeah. Okay, so why do we use AAVs? Well, we can get them to infect every different type of tissue in the body. We can target dividing or non-dividing cells. We can deliver little short snippets of information that will tell the cell how to behave. In this case, they put the gene for telomerase, the bit that adds that little bit on the end, in, and in mice, this added an average life extension of 26%. To bring that into like terms of what's available potentially now to us, average life expectancy in Australia is 82 years old. If we were to take this now, it could extend our lifespan to 104. Bear in mind, that's an average. So we now see some people with an average life expectancy of 82 living to 110. How much further could we go if our life expectancy was 104? Liz Parrish actually injected this on herself. She skirted all regulations by going to Colombia and injected it, and the latest results that have come out have shown that a certain percentage of her cells are getting biologically younger, which is really exciting. Wow. Okay, so the other big one that's all over the news at the moment is these drugs called senolytics. Senolytics remove senescent cells. So senescent cells are zombie cells within the body. They've entered a part of the cell cycle called G0. It basically happens when something goes wrong with a cell and it tries to commit apoptosis, which is like cellular suicide because it realizes something's wrong. But 2 cellular processes battle against each other, and then instead of getting cancer, the cell just sits there dormant. The problem is, over time, these cells emit chemical signals that toxify the other cells around them. I always kind of wrote it off as being this thing that wasn't like, so what, they're just kind of sitting there, they're not doing too much damage, but you accumulate these across your lifespan. Now we have drugs that can clear these out. And I was amazed at the difference that clearing out these empty cells, these zombie cells made. So I'm going to show you a picture now of 2 mice, one that's been treated and one that's been untreated. So this is absolutely huge. If you have a look online, there's a whole heap of different examples. Everything is the same in these 2, the diet, their DNA, they're actually from the same litter. The only thing that's different was the clearing out of senescent cells. And there are drugs almost about to hit the market now that could give us the same ability to clear this out. So this leads me to this idea that's kind of a transhumanist fantasy, but it might actually be here right now, which is called escape velocity. So basically, escape velocity is looking at this graph and extrapolating forward. So in 1970, our life expectancy was about 70. In 40 years, we've added 10 years to our life expectancy. Anyone see where I'm going with this one? Yeah. So every year we live, we get an extra 3 months life expectancy. And technology is increasing exponentially. So the discoveries we make now are making more difference to our life expectancy than they were 100 years ago. So as the tools, as we create the tools shape us. So we're exponentially increasing our lifespan with the technology as it goes along. So we can imagine a scenario where maybe in our lifetimes, our life expectancy is increasing by a year per year. And that's when you become functionally immortal. And everyone in this room might have the option to one day live forever. And we call this a transhumanist singularity. There's a whole heap of different technologies that all converge on this point. But this is one that's being touted now, and those are two of the technologies that allow us to do so. So one day, goodbye. How good's that? Yeah, slide transitions. Okay, so fusion. So as I was introduced, I'm kind of most well known for being one of the first Cyborg Law cases in the world. And this is about not just applying technology in the forms of like biotech, kind of eating pills and stuff, but actually putting technology inside our body in a more literal sense. Even though it's kind of true, like every one of us has is probably some sort of modified human. So I see people with glasses, they're using technology to augment their body. We have hormonal implants that are societally acceptable, that regulate our fertility. Dentistry, all of us have probably had a filling or something like that. And that's a way we're using technology to modify our bodies. Now, there's a huge range of difference in the way that society responds to that. Also, yeah, when I Google implants for this for this thing, I get kind of two main things. One is dentistry, and the other one I can't show in polite company. So we're all okay with pacemakers. Is anyone not okay with pacemakers, actually? No, we all kind of think like, oh, it's okay to put technology in your body if it saves your life. When I show people my implants, it's very divisive. So I have 3 implants at the moment in my left hand. I kind of get one reaction, which is like, yeah, cool, awesome, technology is great. And the other one's a very grotesque reaction. And I think a lot about what are the range of experiences that lead people to not like that when things like dentistry or cosmetic surgery might be more commonly accepted, and what types of cosmetic surgery is more commonly accepted. So I thought about it, and I thought a lot of it has to do with removing disability. So we're okay with a cybernetic arm or a leg if the person didn't have a leg to begin with. But all the journalists in the world keep asking me, so has anyone had a healthy limb or appendage removed to replace it with a cybernetic upgrade? As far as I know, no one has. And I think that that's a really big milestone in this transhuman future that we're moving into. So it's okay to remove disability, even if it gives you an ability beyond what an ordinary person or normally abled person might have, as long as you don't give a normally abled person a greater advancement. So with a lot of the implants that I'm using, they're not necessary. They're either for aesthetics or they give me an ability I didn't have before. How would we feel about this? I think this is really cool. I just found it while I was going. I'm like, I have to stick that in somewhere. So giving ourselves abilities that other people don't have might make other people feel like you're moving the norm into a direction that they're not comfortable with because maybe they don't want to take that next step. So there was a really interesting experiment done with a group of psychologists where they asked people, if there was a pill that gave you an increase of, or gave society an increase of 40 IQ points, how would you feel about giving it to different groups of people? So when they asked, how would you feel about giving it to someone who has an IQ of 70? Bring them up to 110. So that's someone who's classified as having an intellectual disability. Everyone was okay with that. If you gave it to a person with an IQ of 110, they were okay. But if you gave it to someone who's got an IQ of 140, which is technically a genius, everyone felt uncomfortable about it. And I think this gives us an important lesson to think about when we're thinking about the types of cyborg implants and stuff that we're playing with. And I think it points to say which things are kind of okay and which things kind of aren't by society's standards. Okay, so this is my friend Tim. I brought Tim to Australia to start a company making cyborg cows. We put implants that monitor biometrics, and it's actually the next version of this. So in his arm, he has I was about to say small, but it's actually quite large, isn't it? Implant that he built. Now, generally, if you're going to build a medical device, it's going to cost maybe, I'll take that away because it's very distracting. If you're going to build a medical device, it's going to cost you, in the orders of hundreds of millions of dollars. He built this device with his friends for $1,500 and put it into a human. And the medical industry is like, wow, that's incredible that you can do that. But we take a lot of that risk onto ourselves as hackers. Basically what it does is it has fancy LEDs, it takes his body's temperature, it sends the temperature to his BlackBerry, and then the BlackBerry controls the heating in his house. The most important thing about this is the first biohacker implant we had that actually has a brain inside it that changes the environment based around the internal state of the hacker. Every time he went out for a cigarette and got cold, his wife would scream, "Come back in, the heating's on." And it was a revolution, this one. It also has a series of LEDs on there. And when he showed his doctor, the doctor's like, "Tim, what have you done?" And then he clicked a button that switches on party mode, and all the LEDs just flash. And then gave him a massive dose of antibiotics. Okay, so this is a short video of me using the Opal card that's in my hand. So basically, there's kind of two big grinding groups in the world, and the one that's not Tim made all my implants. They took a card, they dissolved the plastic away, and took just the functional piece, the microchip out, and then we made a new antenna for it, and then it was surgically implanted in my hand at a tattoo studio. It was really interesting. I'm happy to talk at length about this during the break, if people are interested, about what the experience of having an Opal card inside my hand was like. I think the most interesting thing here was, it made a really compelling argument for something that I've believed all along, which is that technology makes us more than human. So the further along technology goes, the more barriers are removed between us and technology. So in London, while I was doing this actually, they ran a trial where you didn't have to carry any cards, no credit cards or anything. They had facial recognition software that would find out who you are when you jumped onto a train and when you jumped off, and then just debit the amount out of your account. Now, the thing about this is it's zero UX. There is no user interface. You just go about in the world as you are, and all of the back end is taken care of by computers. Now, we'll leave all the surveillance state stuff to the side for now, but think about this. You could walk, you could go anywhere in Sydney and theoretically pay for stuff, and you could be completely naked. You don't actually have to have any technology on you. I think that implants are a step towards this type of society, and I think that the end goal is actually completely removing technology as something we think about consciously interacting with for the rest of our life, ultimately making us as human as we can be. One of the other most popular biohacker upgrades is a magnet. So it allows you to do some pretty cool things. Probably one of the most interesting things I think it allows you to do is interact with electricity in new ways. So electricity and magnetism as kind of two sides of the same coin. It allows you, how do I go for time, by the way? Beautiful. I'm getting towards the end. So you can feel live currents in cables behind the walls, and you can do things like check fuses. And you can obviously interact with magnetic fields. And Tim is actually thinking about new types of artwork that are only able to be experienced by upgraded humans. And finally, we're moving into a world where there's implants that are there just for aesthetics. So this is called the North Star that Tim made. And it basically, when you wave a magnet over it, so only enhanced people or people with magnets can switch it on, it just flashes some LEDs. And I saw the next kind of iteration of this, which was people using electroluminescent wire as implants down their arms in February, which was really cool. So I mean, this is the stuff I'm most excited for, which is completely no-use implants that are focused on how do we enhance the way that we present ourselves to the world. No, so it's a non-rechargeable battery in here. Yeah, we often talk about beta testing. The people who get the software first and have a go. In grinding, beta testing is pretty brutal. And the terms, oh, I have a failed implant, can have like some pretty drastic consequences. Yeah, but the newer version now can actually receive power via NFC. So it's the same way you use PayWave, you can actually transmit power to a rechargeable battery. Problem is, if anyone had a Samsung Galaxy 7, you've got to have, the considerations change significantly. So a lot of grinders now think that a lot of their implants will be temporary and they'll swap them out. Okay, so I'll just quickly wrap up with some cool examples of brain-computer interfacing. So this is Jan Sherman. She was working for DARPA and she had a small brain-computer interface put into her brain. So she's a quadriplegic that she got a condition later on in life that caused her to not be able to move her arms or her legs. Some researchers from DARPA developed a very small chip, you know, about a millimeter by a millimeter by a millimeter cubed, and put it inside her brain, and she can now control robotic arms. Basically, I'm going to be driving towards this bit that's going to say we're going to fuse with machines. I'll do it quickly though. So we've, a group of Japanese researchers in the past 2 years managed to connect 2 rats' brains across the internet. With that, they were able to solve problems more effectively by sharing information backwards and forwards in a very, very small way. They then have said that they want to connect more rats together into a rat organism. And when we think about things like this, we know that humans can't be far behind. The same group were able to work out using an EEG, whether you were going to throw rock, paper, or scissors in a game, so don't play it against the cyborg, you're always going to lose. And then they took this even further and started taking MRI scans from participants' brains, then feeding them. This is a little bit complicated, but they basically took an fMRI scan, put it through a neural network, and then tried to match that to images, and the output was something like this. So when the participant looked at a letter A, they were able to kind of read a letter A out. And this is the current state. So this is a combination of AI and brain-computer interfacing, and I think that the next 10 or 15 years might yield even more dramatic results. This is some pictures. So the top is the picture that they looked at, and this is what the computer thinks they're looking at. And I think it's actually a good thing. You know, a lot of problems come about through a lack of communication, and I think that being able to exchange brain states with someone is an exciting thing. It's the final way that we can achieve immortality. I won't quick. There we go. Oh, here we go. Cool GIF summarizing the entire speech. Boom. Yeah. We made it. Yeah. So basically, ever since this is in conclusion. Yeah. Basically, ever since we were Homo habilis on the African savannah making tools, we looked at the products of our mind, and we looked around and we saw all the things around us and imagined that a mind greater than us must have made that. Now in the 21st century, we're changing the way that we think about that, and instead of thinking about the type of minds that we can create, so rather than being a product of a god, it's actually our destiny to create it and ultimately fuse with the Godhead. Thank you very much.